AKD have plantations, depots and operating sites in Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland. People who undertake work at all these sites must comply with the legislative requirements of all states, as well as the various acts, regulations, codes of practice and standards associated with the task or activity being undertaken. This induction has been developed to provide a comprehensive set of rules for contractors to follow while on sites within AKD Forestry Estates and applies to all sites and every task, activity and operations we do.
At AKD, there are several health and safety policies that are applicable to you as a contractor to the business. In this section of this presentation, we will discuss these in more detail. The overarching health and safety policy sets the standard fundamentals for working safely at AKD. The foundation of the policy is that safety is everyone's responsibility. All injuries and incidents can be prevented. Everyone should have courage for safety, and if it isn't safe, don't do it. Everyone, including yourselves as contractors, shall meet your obligations to protect the health and safety of yourselves and others affected by your actions or undertaking. Perform your assigned duties in accordance with standard operating procedures and accepted safe working practices. Provide AKD management with any information which may contribute to improving the health and safety of all stakeholders. Follow and comply with all safety requirements of the AKD policies and procedures whilst conducting activities or undertakings on behalf of AKD. And report all safety hazards and incidents in accordance with the AKD reporting processes. AKD does not accept any form of harassment, bullying or discrimination by any individual whilst visiting, supplying, employed or contracted to perform work for AKD. This is outlined in the Anti-Discrimination and Harassment Policy. Everyone is responsible and accountable for their own conduct and is expected to treat one another with dignity, courtesy, respect and to report any failures to comply with this policy immediately. The Fitness for Work policy details the requirement for everyone, including yourselves, to be in a state, both physically and psychologically, fit to perform assigned tasks in a manner that does not compromise your safety and that of others. Everyone, including yourselves as contractors, shall take responsibility for your own health and safety, present to work in a state fit to undertake assigned tasks, not attend work if impaired by or in possession of drugs or alcohol, declare any medical condition or prescription medication that could impact on your fitness for work. Inform your respective manager of any changes in your personal circumstances which may affect your ability to work safely, and immediately report suspected instances of impairment or individuals not being fit for work. The drug and alcohol policy outlines the expectations with regards to maintaining a workplace that is free from the effects and influences of drugs and alcohol. Consumption, possession, or being under the influence of drugs and or alcohol in the workplace is prohibited. All individuals, including yourselves as contractors, are expected to present on-site in a state fit for work. It is unacceptable to present on-site if fitness for work is impaired by the consumption of alcohol and or drugs. Included in this policy, AKD has allocated the provision for testing of drugs and or alcohol. This aims to ensure compliance to this policy and provision of a safe workplace. Whilst working at an AKD premises, you may be subject to this testing. The Electronic Devices Policy is to advise of the safe use of electronic devices at AKD. The use of mobile phones is approved for contractors at AKD. To ensure the safe use of, whilst working in production or yard areas, they must only be used whilst in a stationary position and in a safe location, away from mobile plant and operational hazards. It does not permit you to wear AirPods or equivalent headphone devices, which could prevent you from wearing hearing protection or limit your awareness to potential danger. The AKD smoking policy prohibits any individual whilst visiting, employed or engaged to perform work for AKD. If you are a smoker, you are only permitted to smoke in areas that are signed as designated smoking areas. You are required to completely extinguish the cigarette butt and safely dispose of those butts into the appropriate and provided receptacles, not into the waste bins.
Always assess the risk before starting work and ensure you are trained and competent to complete the task. Always wear a seatbelt when driving or operating a vehicle or machinery. Always isolate energy sources before working on vehicle, plant and equipment. Always ensure any load is secure throughout the journey. Always keep the required safe distance from hazardous operations. Always wear the required personal protective equipment for the job. Never use a handheld mobile phone while driving a vehicle or operating machinery. Never tamper with or override safety features on vehicles, plant or equipment. Never work under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Never work near hazardous trees. Remember, if ever you feel like your safety is being compromised, speak up. The heightened focus on fatal risks is to prevent significant injuries and fatalities to our people and contractors. There are potential fatal risks related to the following 8 aspects of forestry work: people, transport safety, falling timber, mobile plant pedestrian interaction, working at heights, isolation, bushfire, working near power lines. If unsure at any time, please stop and ask. For more information on fatal risks, please see the Forestry Safety Manual. All AKD staff, contractors and visitors must wear and use appropriate PPE when entering or working on AKD land that meets the requirements and expectations of AKD. Hard hats must always be worn on site where there is risk of falling objects. No hats, caps or hoodies can be worn under helmets, and they should be adjusted to fit the wearer correctly. Protective safety boots must be worn on any operational work site. Gumboots may be used as an alternative for specific operations if approved by AKD. All contractors and visitors entering forestry operations must wear high visibility clothing suitable for day or night use. Hearing protection must always be worn when the noise levels exceed 85 dBA and in designated hearing protection areas. Appropriate leg protection must be worn in the field to minimise the risk of accidents and injury from hazards. It is a requirement to wear long pants when engaged in field forest activities within AKD's plantation estate. This mandatory requirement is also deemed to be met by the wearing of shorts plus bushwalking or similar chaps that fully enclose the leg from the ankle to the base of the knee. Before commencing work on any AKD site, contractors must have read and understood the site operations plan for the activity to be undertaken, identify and document any hazards on site, assess the likely risk of an accident or injury to personnel occurring as a result of those hazards, put controls in place that eliminate or minimise these risks, and for hazards that cannot be controlled by the contractor, management by AKD may be required. The Site Operations Plan provides the conditions under which the plantation operations will be conducted at the site. This includes the measures to be undertaken to facilitate a safe workplace and safe operations, and to protect the environmental values on site. Work should only be undertaken in accordance with an approved operations plan. Operations cannot begin without an AKD-approved plan available and on site. Emergency meeting points. Each site operations plan will include details of the emergency meeting point relevant for that operation. Contractors must know the location of the emergency meeting point and be able to communicate this to emergency agencies responding to an incident. Communication. Contractors must have reliable means of communicating with each of their crews. Communication may be via two-way UHF radio or mobile phone, provided the phone reception is strong and reliable. Specific UHF communication requirements will be listed on site operations plans and site entry signage. All incidents must be reported to AKD regardless of potential or actual consequence, in line with the AKD reporting requirements. This includes incidents, near misses, hazards, injuries, damage to plant, and damage to the environment or property. An incident is defined as any unplanned event resulting in or having potential for injury, ill health, damage or other loss. AKD reporting requirements. Insignificant or minor incidents, e.g. first aid, must be reported within 24 hours. Moderate incidents, e.g. MTI, LTI or SPI, must be reported within 2 hours, and major or disastrous incidents must be reported immediately. First aid requirements. The employer of the workers on site must provide for the immediate emergency care of ill or injured employees. On sites where crew work is taking place, there shall be a minimum of 1 crew member available on site with a current first aid certificate for every 10 employees. All other workers must have basic first aid knowledge in case trained first aiders are not immediately available. A clearly marked first aid kit must be kept at each work area. First aid supplies must be stored in containers adequate to protect the contents from damage, deterioration or contamination. These containers must be clearly marked and immediately available and should contain nothing other than first aid equipment. The contents of each first aid kit must be determined by a risk assessment and each kit maintained accordingly. Extreme weather. Contractors on site must monitor weather conditions and ensure that operational controls are enacted prior to a wind event when the wind is forecast to exceed the trigger point for contractors, both at scale 7, minimum 50 kilometres an hour. Where localised conditions exceed those trigger points, contractors must exit the forest and contact AKD immediately. Weather can be monitored at BOM or Willy Weather. Where any forest operation becomes dangerous because of high winds, wet weather, poor visibility or other adverse environmental conditions, the person in charge should suspend all operations while such conditions exist. Bushfire. The aim is to eliminate or minimise the risk of fatalities, serious injury and plantation area loss arising from bushfire. Bushfire presents a risk to contractors either working or travelling through forested areas. Forest work bans. In order to minimise risk, all contractors should be aware of what the fire danger rating is each day during the fire season. AKD will implement a complete forest work ban on days where the fire danger rating exceeds a forest fire danger index of 45. Forest work bans are put in place to ensure no work takes place in the forest that may inadvertently cause a fire. In the event of a fire, there are no workers in the forest, to ensure firefighting personnel are ready to respond. All contractors must cease work and leave the forest by the time the ban comes into effect and not return for the period of the ban. Operations are only to occur within the plantation area, fire breaks and access tracks. Avoid entering wet areas, creek lines, wetlands, other areas of native vegetation and native grasses. No disturbance of native vegetation is permitted unless it has been authorised by an AKD representative. Cultural heritage can refer to many things, such as canoe trees or scar trees, tools, weapons. There is to be no disturbance of cultural heritage and heritage sites that are identified on AKD sites. Always refer to site operations plans, and if any cultural heritage sites are found, report to AKD immediately. Where overhead power, transmission or telephone lines exist within a site, the following safe system of work and control measures are to be followed. Trees within 2 tree lengths of power lines must not be felled until a felling plan has been agreed between the asset or network owner, AKD, and the contractor. A suppression order is needed within 2 tree lengths of a power line. If no suppression is possible, a formal documented risk management must be undertaken and approved by AKD before operations commence. The use of a spotter is needed within 1.5 tree lengths of a power line. Shut-off will be obtained for exceptional circumstances. Where plant crosses underneath a power line, the contractor and AKD must undertake a risk assessment and cross at designated crossing points that are marked with signage. Drivers of vehicles must be appropriately licensed, drive to the conditions and must not exceed 60 kilometres an hour on AKD roads. Have a thorough knowledge of the regulations and instructions for operating the class of vehicle they are driving. Wear a seatbelt at any time the vehicle is moving and monitor fatigue levels and take appropriate and required rest breaks. Mobile plant and vehicles must be roadworthy, be fit for purpose, have rollover protection where applicable. Hazardous trees are identified by one or more of the following characteristics: extensive branching, poor health and vigour, heavy crowns, or adjacent to roads and other assets. Any hazardous trees must be felled by machinery with the capability to handle the size and weight of the tree. Wind-thrown trees are those that have been brought down by strong winds. All the normal hazards are multiplied by the presence of partial or complete breaks and by shatter and tension in trees which may be standing but weakened, leaning or fallen. Unless authorised by an AKD supervisor, only mechanical methods of salvaging wind-thrown trees should be used. Where practicable, once wind-thrown trees have been salvaged, stumps should be set upright again. Where hazardous overhanging trees or branches impact on the safe passing of vehicles, they must be removed where reasonably practicable. It's important that native vegetation clearing controls are always adhered to. Native vegetation, regardless of AKD land or not, needs prior approval from the AKD supervisor, as well as permission of the landowner or land manager. Thank you for completing this contractor induction. For more information on anything covered in this induction, please refer to the AKD Forestry Safety Manual.